Thank you. The next item of business is portfolio questions, and portfolio questions this afternoon are net zero and energy and transport. And again, I would always make a call for brief questions and brief supplementaries and brief answers in order to get in as many members as possible. Question number 1 has been withdrawn. Question number 2, Annie Wells.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what recent assessment it has made of the feasibility of its target to achieve net zero emissions by 2045.
Minister Alice Rallan.
The Government's commitment to net zero by 2045 is absolutely unwavering. We are continuing to develop and take forward climate.
But we need the Minister's microphone. Yes.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes, Minister, thank you.
Thank you. Schoolboy error. This Government's commitment to net zero by 2045 is absolutely unwavering. We are continuing to develop and take forward climate policies ahead of the Climate Change Committee's advice on new carbon budget levels due this May. Once we have received this advice, we will bring forward the carbon emission targets via secondary legislation, which will set a deliverable course towards net zero, with the aim of publishing a draft climate change plan to achieve those targets in the autumn.
Annie Wells.
I thank the Minister for that answer. We are beginning to see what happens when the Scottish Government sets ambitious targets for the climate without any concrete plan on how they plan to achieve these goals. Last year, the Scottish Government ditched its target of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 75% by 2030, and in January, Audit Scotland said the Scottish Government is unlikely to meet its 2030 target to reduce car use by 20% due to lack of leadership. And it's now been reported that environmental consultants Ricardo AEA have told the Scottish Government that their 2045 net zero target is at risk of being missed. Can the Minister assure the Parliament that the Government's failure to keep the 2045 target on track will not lead to higher net zero costs being imposed on Scottish households?
Minister.
It should be said, by way of response to those important questions, it should be said that some of the commentary anticipating missing the 2045 targets is applicable only if emission reductions from land use, etc. were not considered and if no further policies were brought forward. But the Scottish Government, as I say, is entirely committed to 2045. In 2022, the Scottish Government commissioned an analytical report on estimated projection of Scottish emissions from 2019 to 2045, which is published on the Scottish Government website. And this was a snapshot in time, and since then we have been developing policies for the next climate change plan. And the figures for that, as I say, are available. Technology reductions were excluded from emission reduction considerations. Land use will form an important part of our forthcoming climate change plan.
Supplementary, Sarah Boyack.
When the Scottish Government dumped their annual and interim targets, Myra McCallan announced a package of 19 reheated old policies to show the Scottish Government was supposedly taking action. But I have received an FOI response in which the Scottish Government admits that only 4 of these 19 policies have been delivered, and some of those are even questionable. So can the Minister outline the measurable actions being taken now? Because our constituents surely cannot afford missing 2045 as a target, given the impact on their lives and businesses.
Minister.
Well, I could certainly list measurable activities in many areas, from peatland restoration, where good progress is being made towards that, with over 75,000 hectares restored to date. I could mention forestry, with the most ambitious woodland creation targets in the UK. I could mention farming reform and many other areas. But the Scottish Government, as I say, is committed to 2045, and the next climate change plan is being developed to ensure that we get there.
And supplementary, Audrey Nicholl.
Thank you. Scotland is on a journey to becoming a renewable energy powerhouse facilitated by our just transition to net zero. However, this will require the cooperation of the UK Government in projects like the Acorn carbon capture and storage. So can the Minister provide an update on engagement with the UK Government on the Acorn project, a project that is of huge importance to the North East?
Minister.
The member is right on that. Scottish ministers regularly engage with the UK Government counterparts to push for a decision on Acorn. Carbon capture is vital for achieving our climate targets, with advice from the Climate Change Committee describing it as a necessity, not an option, to achieve net zero emissions. Scottish Cluster is essential not just to Scotland, where our target of reaching net zero is 2045, but also for achieving the UK's 2050 target. So that progress and investor confidence can be maintained, we are pushing for the UK Government to make a clear and meaningful public announcement by return, and certainly ahead of June, confirming that the UK Government is committed to awarding Track 2 status to the Acorn project and Scottish Cluster.
Question number 3, Megan Gallagher.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on when it plans to introduce its proposed Heat in Buildings Bill.
Minister Alistair Allen.
We are considering the responses to our consultation on proposals for a Heat in Buildings Bill and will respond as soon as practicable. But we also know that further action by the UK Government in reserved areas is essential for the heat transition. This includes rebalancing gas and electricity prices, clarity on its intentions for phasing out gas boilers in existing homes, and a swift decision on the future role of the gas grid in line with the CCC's recent advice.
Megan Gallagher.
We've only got 14 months left, Minister, but the housing sector does need certainty when it comes to substantial proposals and changes that have been suggested by this government. And the fact that the government is no further forward in bringing this bill to Parliament leaves serious questions unanswered in relation to EPC ratings. I understand the government is consulting on EPCs. However, the current deadline for landlords to become EPCC compliant is 2028. Does the Minister feel that this target is achievable when less of private homeowners are EPC compliant, and the government may shift the goalposts on what EPC ratings and the scope of those are? So will the government look at the current timelines to make sure that what they are proposing, suggesting and what they're expecting of private homeowners is in sync?
Minister.
I thank the member. I think it's important to separate out two issues in that question. So firstly, there is the issue of EPC reform, which, as the member mentions, is happening, is progressing, and on which the Scottish Government has been taking views and will ensure that change is made. The second issue I think is alluding to is whether legislation should require a certain EPC rating of homeowners and those who rent out properties. That's a separate question. It is connected to some of the questions around the Heat and Building Bill, and as I say, the Scottish Government will return on that as soon as practicable.
Question number 4, Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to ensure the process for approving renewable energy developments above 50 megawatts encourages developers to carry out high-quality consultations and give communities sufficient information and opportunity to engage meaningfully.
Minister Alistair Allen.
Meaningful consultation of local authorities, communities and members of the public is key to the determination process for renewable energy developments above, as the member says, 50 megawatts. Developers are instructed to follow our good practice guidance on pre-application consultation involving communities, as this is the best stage for communities to help shape the development before an application is submitted. The Scottish Government is committed to further strengthening the engagement process for communities by making pre-application consultations a statutory requirement as part of the UK Government's proposed reforms on electricity infrastructure consenting in Scotland.
Brian Whittle.
I thank the Minister for that answer. As you may be aware, the proposed Roger Hill solar farm near Blackwood looks to be set to be one of the largest solar sites in the UK if approved. However, I have been struck by concerns from the community about the impact the development could have on the area's children as it borders an outdoor learning facility. And concerningly, there appears to be conflicting views as to whether the development should trigger a child's right and wellbeing impact assessment under the terms of the UN CRC Incorporation Scotland, with the ECU arguing the decision of the development is exempt and not of a strategic nature, while the Children and Young People's Commissioner has said he saw no reason why the ECU would not conduct a children's rights and wellbeing impact assessment. Will the Minister consider instructing the ECU to carry out this assessment, and if not, what do they consider to be a decision of the strategic nature if the construction of one of the country's largest solar farms doesn't qualify?
Minister.
Well, as I think the member has identified in his question, this is a live planning process, and I am part of the planning process, and he will understand why I simply cannot comment on a live planning application. He is, of course, entitled to raise issues that are of concern to him in his community as part of that process. I cannot prejudice it by commenting on it, I'm afraid. And I'm afraid that's all I can add.
Supplementary, Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Regarding community engagement, the ability to make pre-application community engagement mandatory is reserved to the UK Government under the consenting regime in the UK Electricity Act 1989, limiting our ability to reform energy policy. Can the Minister advise what engagement the Scottish Government has had with the new UK Government on reforms to ensure that processes can be taken forward swiftly while giving local communities a voice?
Minister.
Scottish Government officials have been working, and I should say working very positively, with their UK Government counterparts on proposed reforms to the Electricity Act since February 2024, before the current administration took office. We helped to inform the content of the UK Government consultation that was published in October last year, and one of the most important proposals is giving local communities a stronger voice in the consenting process. For the first time, a pre-application consultation would be statutory, guaranteeing that communities can express their views early in the process to help shape any developments that are put forward. Ultimately, this legislation is reserved, so we must wait and see how the proposals are managed through the Westminster parliamentary process.
And supplementary, Mercedes Verber.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. New renewable energy developments across North East Scotland are crucial for Scotland and the UK if we want to decarbonise our energy supply and ensure we meet Labour's goal of making the UK a clean energy superpower by 2030. But these developments must have the informed consent and support of the local communities they're built in. A best-case example is Aberdeen Community Energy's Donside Hydro, which has been established, owned and run by the local community to generate clean electricity for nearby homes. How is the Scottish Government working to promote community ownership and control of new renewable energy?
Minister.
Well, the member raises interesting and important points around those issues. For instance, one of the things that the Scottish Government is seeking to do is to open up a conversation with the UK Government about the issue of mandating community benefits, and that is a reserved issue, but it's one I hope we can have a fruitful conversation on. And certainly the Scottish Government is supportive of all communities who seek in varying ways to make sure that they get a community benefit for the project in their area.
Question number 5, Claire Baker.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what measures it is taking to improve road safety.
Cabinet Secretary Fiona Hislop.
The Scottish Government is committed to making Scotland's roads safe for all. Backing this commitment is a record £36 million investment, set to increase to £48 million in 2025-26 to fund targeted initiatives aimed at reducing road casualties and enhancing safety. This includes national behaviour change campaigns, targeted road safety schemes on trunk and local roads, and effective speed management through the National Strategy for 20 miles per hour and the National Speed Management Review. We are also strengthening expertise by training over 500 road safety practitioners in the internationally recognised Safe System approach by June 2025.
Claire Baker.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that response. Addressing driver behaviour must be part of the approach to reducing fatality rates. National speeding awareness courses have been in place in England and Wales for a number of years, and studies have shown they can be more effective at reducing speed reoffending than a fine and penalty points. The Scottish Government has been asked on a number of occasions, most recently today at FMQs, but we still don't have an answer as to why they aren't available in Scotland. So is the Scottish Government committed to introducing the courses, and what are the next steps?
Cabinet Secretary.
As Transport Secretary, I am very supportive of speed awareness courses as part of addressing this issue. It is something that the Cabinet Secretary for Justice is taking forward with Justice and Police colleagues. I will report to Parliament when there is progress on that, but in terms of the importance of it, I think it is required as a diversion. And after this question session, I'll be chairing the Road Safety Partnership Board. Police Scotland are members of that, and I will be pressing them to understand what progress is being made.
Supplementary, Mark Ruskell.
Thank you. I mean, it's clear that councils are doing really important work this year using that Scottish Government budget on road safety, pavement parking enforcement, rollout of 20 mile an hour. But would the Cabinet Secretary agree that the success of these measures really does come down to that improved driver awareness, particularly in built-up areas, particularly about the dangers of speeding and of dangerous parking? So what kind of national road safety campaigns can be deployed to really get that national message that speeding does kill, we should slow down in town, and that we should be parking responsibly as drivers?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I've just indicated that there are a number of national behaviour change campaigns. The most recent one is on distracted driver behaviour. It is quite alarming that some people think it's acceptable to look at their phones while they're driving, and I think that really is a concern on any of our roads. In terms of some of the other areas, particularly on speed, there are also campaigns on speed as well, and as part of that, again, is highlighting that if you are travelling at speed, and in some cases some people don't even wear their seatbelts, the impact of that, not just on you but on other people, can be extremely severe, resulting in death but also harm. So these are all part of the campaigns I'm talking about, and that is why we're putting a record amount of funding into road safety.
Question number 6, Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how the proportion of ScotRail trains that were cancelled in 23-24 compares with other rail operators across the UK.
Cabinet Secretary.
ScotRail performs better than most GP operators. ScotRail cancellations last financial year averaged at just over 2% of all services. That's fewer cancellations than immediately before public ownership and lower than the 2023-24 GB average of 3.8%. Most recently recorded ScotRail cancellations are at 1.9% and 4.2% for GB network as a whole. This demonstrates ScotRail's continued progress and its commitment to providing a reliable service for people of Scotland. ScotRail also compares favourably with other operators in Scotland. For example, for privately operated Avanti and Cross Country, recorded cancellation rates in 2023-24 were around 7% and 8% respectively, and for LNER and TransPennine Express cancellations were recorded at 4.8% that year.
Kenneth Gibson.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Figures from the Office for Rail and Road show ScotRail has one of the lowest cancellation rates of train operators in the UK, as we've just heard, and that Network Rail was responsible for more than half of the delayed minutes on ScotRail, with 551,873 minutes lost last year. Given that responsibility for Network Rail lies exclusively with the UK Labour Government, will Scottish ministers continue to raise the need for improvements with that government?
Cabinet Secretary.
All delays are disappointing, and my officials at Transport Scotland work closely with Network Rail to ensure that it delivers value for the £4.2 billion this government is providing it between 2024 and 2029. Network Rail is reserved to the UK government, but it hasn't stopped the Conservative MSP Douglas Lumsden excessive numbers of written questions about it. I'm not sure if we get a rebate on that, but I do expect ScotRail and Network Rail to work together under the Alliance Agreement to deliver the best service possible for the people of Scotland. However, I know that the only way to truly ensure the best outcomes for Scotland's railway is through full devolution of rail to Scotland, and it is for this reason the Scottish ministers continue to call for this.
Supplementary, Willie Rennie.
The rail services stopping at Newborough in Fife have been cancelled for decades. Can the Cabinet Secretary give the Chamber an update as to when she plans to reopen the railway station?
Cabinet Secretary.
I would compliment the member in trying to get a question about cancellations over some period, which is actually a closure, into a pitch for that station. I think he raises an important point in terms of how we look ahead in terms of investment in rail. There's an issue about track, quite clearly. There's an issue around the procurement of fleet services, but there's also about the availability and accessibility. And in terms of the cost-benefit analysis, also multimodal and other alternatives. And it is in that round that I think assessments for investment in stations such as Newborough could be looked at.
Supplementary, Sue Webber.
Thank you. Last week, 70 passengers were evacuated from a ScotRail intercity train, and trains between Edinburgh and Aberdeen were suspended after a power car caught fire near the Tay rail bridge, causing disruption for hours. In light of this, Cabinet Secretary, what actions are being undertaken to foster resilience in the ScotRail fleet, particularly at a time when key routes often rely on older trains? And can the Cabinet Secretary provide a timeline for when the new Inter-7 City fleet will be procured?
Thank you. And I assume that the focus of this question should be on the issue of cancellations. Cabinet Secretary.
Yes. Well, clearly there was an impact because of the results of that incident that resulted in cancellations across that network. And I also want to take an opportunity to compliment the professionalism of everybody that was involved in that incident and the evacuation, the safe evacuation. Lessons have to be learned, obviously, an incident in terms of reporting, in terms of the cause of that particular fire. But in terms of the safety, I was extremely impressed by everyone involved, and I'd like to put on record my thanks to them. In terms of the issue around replacement of fleets, I will be able to update Parliament appropriately, but it is important that we progress on the replacement of fleets to ensure that we have the train services that we require for the modern age.
Supplementary briefly, Douglas Lumpson.
Thank you, President Officer. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary how many ScotRail trains were axed in 2022 and 2024 due to the temporary timetable being introduced, and how that figure compares with service reduction in the rest of the UK?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, clearly issues around industrial action were not just reserved to the Scottish situation. Indeed, there was a long and ongoing extensive cancellations and indeed industrial action in the rest of the UK. So in terms of the numbers that were cancelled, clearly these were adjusted by an appropriate amended timetable. He will be aware that when timetables are planned and where there are changes in timetables planned, as was the case over the summer period, they would not be counted as cancellations, and so therefore in terms of that comparison I'm quite happy to be very transparent about that, but the figures that I have just relayed still stand and show the better than rest of UK performance by ScotRail services.
Brief supplementary, Claire Baker.
Well, thank you. The Cabinet Secretary knows that performance measure doesn't take account of short-form trains. It is effectively a cancellation for passengers who are unable to board. And for example, in my region, across December and January, one train was short-formed 65% of the time. Why are these particular issues targeted for short-forming, and when can we see improvements?
Cabinet Secretary.
So there will be shortly very important improvement, particularly in the 5 service, with the two trains an hour running at Leven that will relieve pressure on the availability of spaces within trains, and that will be an improvement. I would say that in terms of the 5 performance on the period ending in Saturday 1st of February, the 5 Circle was performing at 90.2%. That actually indeed is stronger than other parts of the network, and particularly in Mr Gibson's area, for example. So in terms of the short forming, that will also be relieved by diesel availability from other parts of the network once electrification takes place, which is more imminent in relation, for example, to the East Kilbride line.
Question number 7, Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to promote hydrogen production and usage in Scotland.
Minister Allen.
Hydrogen is key to our net zero journey. We remain committed to developing a world-leading green hydrogen sector in Scotland. Alongside our enterprise agencies, we are engaging closely with the sector to support hydrogen production and use. Over recent months, I've chaired the Scottish Hydrogen Industry Forum. This grouping ensures that government and industry working together can support growth and identify barriers to deployment. Many levers required to develop the hydrogen economy are reserved to the UK Government. We will work closely with them to ensure that the interests of the Scottish hydrogen sector are recognised.
Kevin Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I thank the Minister for that answer. And it is a great pity that some of the reserved issues are holding back investment in production and usage in Scotland. We're still waiting for the UK Government to update hydrogen storage and transportation regulations, which continues to cause investment uncertainty. What discussions or communications have Scottish ministers had with the UK Government, urging them to get the finger out on this issue?
Minister Allen.
Well, it's certainly true to say the establishment of a robust regulatory framework is key to deployment of hydrogen as an important part of our future energy mix. So, with that in mind, we continue to urge the UK Government to accelerate its consideration of the regulations required to enable the development of hydrogen infrastructure and the establishment of business models that would support hydrogen transport and storage, to provide some clarity and confidence to developers investing in driving forward hydrogen production projects in Scotland. And I would merely add to that I would also urge the UK Government to set out the time frame for an accelerated decision on hydrogen blending in the gas grid.
And brief supplementary, Stephen Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Hydrogen production is reported to be a key part of Project Willow, and yet the Scottish Government failed to publish the report that was promised last week. And while Colin Mackay of STV has seen the report, none of us in here have. So when will this hydrogen important report finally be published?
Minister.
Well, the report will be published in due course, but what I can say to the member is that he will be aware that the two governments have been working closely together to strain every sinew to ensure that both in the long term and in the immediate term, intervention is there to support the workforce and the businesses at Grangemouth. Hydrogen is part of that. Clearly, decisions about carbon capture at UK level are part of that. And clearly also is the work that we're doing within the Grangemouth community.
And question number 8, Richard Leonard.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And can I remind members of my voluntary register of trade union interests to ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on what steps it is taking to reduce car use by 20% by 2030.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government is supporting reduced car use by providing free bus travel for 2.3 million people in Scotland, 1.6 billion to rail this financial year, and supporting regional transport partnerships and councils developing affordable, available and accessible alternatives. We continue to press the UK Government for a four nations approach to reform of fuel duty. I recognise that car use will remain an important part of rural life. There will be different routes to reducing car use in different parts of Scotland, and I do not expect to see car use in rural areas reduced at the same scale as in urban areas. COSLA has now agreed to jointly publish a renewed policy statement on car use reduction in spring 2025. Behaviour change takes time, and following the Audit Scotland recommendation to clarify our commitment, we will review the existing target informed from the advice due from the Climate Change Committee to develop a new longer-term target.
Richard Leonard.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that reply, but let me ask her, will next month's rise in all rail fares, last year's reinstatement of peak rail fares and this year's cut in Railway Ticket Office opening hours move us closer to or further away from the Government's target of a 20% reduction in car use by 2030, or have they secretly abandoned the target altogether?
Cabinet Secretary.
We secretly haven't abandoned anything. I think it was indicated in May 2024 that that target would be challenging. I would urge the member, and I look forward, I think, to attending the Public Audit Committee on this issue shortly, to explain the progress of what we will do in response to the imminent Climate Change Committee's report. I would add that we are now expecting 88.5 million passenger journeys by the end of March. That's an increase from 82 million in 23-24. And since the peak fares pilot was ended, demand has grown in each of the 4 full periods of 4 weeks by an average of 4.5% compared to the same period last year when the peak fare removal was running. So despite that, we are seeing passenger growth, which should be welcomed.
And brief supplementary, Graham Simpson, who is joining us remotely. Mr Simpson.
Yeah, thank you very much. Would the Cabinet Secretary agree with me that the Scottish Government has absolutely no chance of achieving this target?
Cabinet Secretary.
We indicated, if he was listening to my answer to Richard Leonard, we indicated to the Parliament in May 2024 that there would be a serious risk of that not being met. I've addressed that in Parliament. I think we are going to have to revise our target, and we need to do that by advice by the Climate Change Committee. There will be changes that will be impact in terms of where we will get to in emissions, and would that very extremely high and challenging target is that still required to deliver the emissions and changes we need? We need car use reduction to help ease congestion, to encourage, and that means with the investment in public transport is so important. But I would refer the member to the forthcoming Climate Change Committee advice that will help us shape the way forward.
Thank you, Cabinet Secretary. That concludes portfolio questions on net zero and energy and transport. And there will be a short pause before we move on to the next item of business to allow front bench teams to change position should they so wish. Thank you.